Hey guys, hi, welcome back to my channel. It's me, Steven. Yes, I know it's not Vlogmas. I'm still filming these videos almost every day. There's just so much to say. I was going to take today off. I wasn't going to film today, but I got a message from Marielle, I think it was. She just received a conditional job offer with my airline yesterday, and she'll be going to training at the end of the month. And we had a short chat about preparing for training and the things she'll have to memorize. And for me, I shared personally, I found the most difficult thing to memorize were aircraft schematics. And schematics isn't a word that we use frequently. I'm not sure who uses the word schematics. Engineers, maybe architects, I don't know. But when you're going to become a flight attendant, who thinks the word schematics, right? So schematics for our airline, for my airline, is a list of all of the emergency equipment on the aircraft, how many pieces there are, where they're located, and on which side of the aircraft they're also located on. And we have to know, really sight unseen, what everything is. And you really want to know that before you go into training, because the schematics tests are frequently early on in training. And the last thing you want to do is to be sent home because you failed a couple schematics tests. It happened in my class. One young lady, she failed two schematics tests, and she went home over schematics. So you don't want to be that person. So she was like, "Well, what are schematics, and how would you suggest studying for them?" And so I said, rather than write out everything because it's a process, I figured let me just make a video because you're probably not the only one who would like to know. And so we both had a good laugh over videos on demand, as this is. And so how did I study for schematics? Well, my airline sends us all the information we really need to know before training in an email that we receive just after getting our conditional job offer. And in that email, there is going to be a lot of stuff, but one of them is a sheet that is sort of a diagram of the aircraft and of each of the aircraft. Now, we have a number of aircraft. We had to memorize 5 different aircraft in my training. That might be different now, I don't know. But so there were 5 sheets that were diagrams of each aircraft, and each diagram had a list of each piece of emergency equipment that we use, where it's located, what side of the aircraft, how many there are, and so on and so on. And we had to memorize all of it. Now, I made the mistake of looking at the A321 SpaceFlex, which is our largest and most complicated aircraft. There's a lot of stuff that we had to memorize, and it was daunting. In fact, when I first saw it, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I haven't studied for a test in 30 years. How am I going to do this? I had no study skills. So the other sheet was a blank sheet. It was a blank diagram of those aircraft. And at the top, I think it said something about being a sample test sheet. And I figured, well, if this is going to be a sample of what the test is going to look like, and this is the format, I want to study in the same format so that when I do have to actually take the test, all I have to do is jot the information down in the same form that I have in front of me. That seemed fairly sensible to me. A lot of people approached it using flashcards. They made little songs, little acronyms over all the items in each section. But I found this method to be, the one I'm going to share with you just now, incredibly tedious. Wow. And you'll understand that. Incredibly tedious, but really effective, because when I went to take these schematics tests, it just flew right out of me. I just filled them in like this. I just had to sit there and double check my work. The only mistake I made during schematics, any of them, was I didn't list on which side of the aircraft our lifelines were found. I got the right placement, but I didn't say which side they were on, so I got those wrong. So how did I prepare for schematics? So as I mentioned, for each different aircraft, there were 2 sheets. And so in my handy binder, which I filled with plastic sheet protectors, and that's key, the plastic sheet protectors, I would go for these little heavy dutier sheet protectors than I did. I got super thin cheap ones, but if there are thicker, sort of more substantial versions, go with those. I had a little zipper full of pens, things like that. And inside, the other component for my success are these little dry erase markers. Now, when the first time I did this, I found fine tip dry erase markers by Expo. I didn't know they made ultra fine tip. And so this is the ultra fine tip. Can you see that? Let's see if the camera is going to cooperate. Maybe you can. But I'll show you in a minute. And this was important that it was an ultra fine tip. It was just easier to read when I was writing. So what did I do? I got in my sheet protectors in my binder. These are just blank white sheets. Well, they're the back of other stuff. I'm not sure if I should show you, honestly. But so I would put the data sheet on one side that had all the information. And on the other side, facing it, I would put my blank sample test sheet. All right. So in the front up here, it would have, I'll put this away now. It would have, for example, everything that was in the cockpit of an A319. We fly all Airbus aircraft. So everything that was in a cockpit of an A319. So you have your crew O2 masks, your crew life vests, flashlights, crash acts, escape ladders, fireproof gloves. What else is in there? So you're going to have all of that stuff in there written down. And so what I would do is I would get my dry erase marker. I'd go over to the blank sample test sheet and I'd fill in each of the items that was found in the cockpit of an A319 aircraft. I would look at it, make sure I had it right. Then I'd go over and look at my data sheet to see what the correct answers were and match it up. And if I was wrong in anything, I'd wipe the sample test sheet clean with a tissue. Then I would look at the data sheet again. I'd go back to my sample test sheet and I'd fill it all in again. And if I made a mistake, I wipe it clean. And I'd do it all over again. And if I got it 100%, if I got it all right, I'd wipe it clean again and do it over again until I got it right like 2 or 3 times in a row. Then I'd move down to the next section, which is the forward galley. And so I'd look at all the items I found in our forward galley. And what you're going to find up there, you're going to find a MRT, a flashlight, a crew life vest. You're going to find a megaphone. You're going to find, what else are you going to find up there? Our PVE. You're going to find POBs. You're going to find a first aid kit. You're going to find an emergency medical kit. You're going to find survival kits. What else is going to be up there? Lots of stuff. Flex cuffs, emergency medical kits. So I wanted to memorize what was in the forward galley, which side of the aircraft I would find which number of pieces, and I would memorize that as well as I could on the data sheet. Then I'd go over to the sample sheet, and what would I start with? Out of curiosity, do you think I would start with the cockpit, or do you think I would start with the forward galley? Because I had already memorized the cockpit, right? Those of you who said it'd start with the cockpit, you're right. I would start with the cockpit, and I'd fill out everything in the cockpit, and then I'd continue on to the forward galley. And I'd look at my data sheet and make sure I had it right. And if I had it wrong in any way, I'd wipe the whole sheet clean and do it all over again. And do it all over again until I got it right, and then I would do it all over again. I know it sounds tedious, and it really was at first. Then it became sort of a challenge and almost a game, and it was oddly satisfying, actually. And so then I would go into mid-cabin. What would I find in mid-cabin? I would look at the items in the mid-cabin. And lifelines, what used to be our demo kits used to be in the mid-cabin. And I would look around for the things I'd find mid-cabin on an A319. I'd fill them in. And again, I would start at the cockpit and make my way down to the mid-cabin. And if I got anything wrong, I wipe the sheet clean. If I got it wrong, I'd wipe it clean. If I got it right, I'd wipe it clean, and I'd do it over again until I got it right a couple times. So I would do this and I'd do the back galley, the aft galley. Same story. I'd look, I'd fill it out, wipe it clean, fill it out, wipe it clean, until I got it right a couple times. And I know that sounds really tedious and kind of like a nightmare. And it really was the first couple times. And then when I started to get it right, every time I got it right was so satisfying. And when I finally was able to fill out the schematics list for the A319 completely without making a mistake a couple times in a row, I felt so excited and so pumped and so motivated. So then I would start with the A320 and I would do the same thing over again. Again, that sounds tedious. I had roughly 6 weeks between my job offer and my first day of training. So I was able to sit down and do this over the course of a few weeks. I was very lucky. Some people are going to training at the end of this month. They may only have 2.5 or 3 weeks. No pressure. You can do this. You really can, I promise. I promise. Trust me, I promise you. So that's what I did to prepare for schematics. I started with the smallest aircraft, went to the next largest aircraft, next most complicated aircraft, and then moved on to the 321 and the 321 SpaceFlex, which just when I first started looking at this stuff seemed so daunting. It was just impossible that I could do this. And by the time I memorized the other aircraft, approaching the 321 seemed relatively easy because I had figured out a rhythm of remembering what was in each spot. And I started to recognize that in each jump seat, except for 2 of our aircraft, in each jump seat, I was going to find the same stuff. I was going to find a life vest. I was going to find an MRT. I was going to find a flashlight. I was going to find a PBE at every jump seat, except for 2 in 2 aircraft in my airline, because 2 aircraft, some of those items are moved up to a overhead bin. But for the most part, I was going to find all of these things in each jump seat. And in the same case, I would find the same stuff in each cockpit. There'd be a slight variation in number of items, particularly with life vests or O2 masks. And I would find the same number of things in the galleys. Like there's always going to be POBs. There's always going to be an emergency medical kit, at least in my airline. There's always going to be first aid kits. All right, so one thing that, one little mnemonic I had, especially for working in the galley and memorizing what was in the galley. In a galley, for me, I could almost equate to a kitchen, right? That's where we find a lot of our kitchen stuff, right, in a galley. Again, mind you, we're working with my airline. Every galley is going to be very, very different. So your galley might actually have ovens. We don't, of course. We serve Pringles and, Chex Mix. But in our galleys, I treated it as if it were a kitchen. What would I find in a kitchen? I'm going to find oxygen, because oxygen is used to burn. Flames need oxygen. So I'm going to find oxygen. So a POB is going to be in there. And every POB, in my airline at least, is going to have 2 oxygen masks. So if I remembered how many POBs there were in each aircraft, I knew how many masks there were to go with those POBs. What else is in a kitchen? First aid kit might be in a galley. Survival kits. To me, survival kit sounded like food almost. And so I'm always going to find food in a kitchen. So the survival kit is going to go in the galley as well. Emergency medical kits are going to be found in my galley. So I started to kind of imagine a kitchen, and all the elements I'd find in a kitchen, I equated with pieces of emergency equipment. Does that make any sense at all? And I use that same sort of thing in the rest of the aircraft as well. So each aircraft for me was like a little room. What would I find in each of those rooms? Well, these items. And so a combination of that thinking, that way of thinking, and just muscle memory of repeatedly writing these things out on my blank sample test sheets allowed me to just fly through my schematics test during training. Some people struggled with some of those schematics, and it was just a breeze for me. I did get on the 319, I got two questions wrong, in that I did not write what side of the aircraft I'd find our lifelines. Dumb mistake. But that was how I managed to study schematics. I've been talking for 15 minutes about that. I apologize. While I'm talking about studying for training, I'll touch on city codes and terminology and acronyms. I personally found my own flashcards to be useful. The act of me writing out the information on a flashcard seemed easier for my mind to hold on to versus flipping through something on my phone. So I wrote out flashcards for city codes. I wrote the city code on one side and the city and country that I'd find that airport on the other side of that card. And I brought those flashcards everywhere. I brought them to the bathroom. I brought them to the supermarket. I brought them to the laundromat. I carried them in my bag. So if I was sitting on a bus, everywhere I went, I spent some time by a pool in St. Pete at the Flamingo Resort, flipping through my city code flashcards. And I did the same thing also for terminology and acronyms. And when I was going through them, the ones that I remembered easily, like city codes, I remember BOS, Boston, flip, turn it over. I actually removed that from the deck completely and I tossed it because there was no way I was going to forget BOS being Boston. What else? LAX. That's Los Angeles. So I'm always going to remember that. So I threw that away. Portland, PDX. Throw that away. I remember that one. MCI. It's Kansas City. MCI didn't make any sense to me. MCI, Kansas City. MCI, could not put the two together. For some reason, I don't know why, MCI is the name of a prison system in Massachusetts, where I'm from. And so I remembered MCI prison. I don't know why, but remembering MCI prison, I could somehow remember, oh, that's Kansas City. And I put the two of them together. I'll never forget MCI. And once I knew it, I threw it away. And I stuck down to like the couple that I couldn't remember, like Armenia. Like, how am I going to remember that? So I would just walk around now with like 10 flashcards rather than 71. And I just work on the ones that I couldn't seem to remember until I muscled through. And then eventually I'd throw the damn card out. So city codes, I just kind of used my own flashcards. Same thing with terminologies and acronyms. Once I figured out WX was weather, MX was maintenance, chuck them. I threw them away. And I just kept the flashcards I could not seem to remember. And those are typically acronyms that just seem so weird to me that I could never remember them. And there you go. So that's kind of how I studied for schematics. A little bit about how I touched on remembering my city codes and terminology. And I hope that helped a little bit, Marielle. If it didn't, certainly let me know. Or if you guys have any of your own tricks and your own tips on how to memorize your aircraft schematics, certainly let me know. And I'd be curious, something else, if you're still watching. If you work for a different airline, do you have to memorize every single piece of emergency equipment on every one of your aircraft? For some reason, I just can't imagine, like Delta, to be qualified for every type of aircraft that you guys have. You guys have so many different aircraft. Do you have to memorize every single piece of emergency equipment on every single aircraft? Or what do you have to do? So if you have worked for a different airline and you have a different experience with your emergency equipment and schematics, drop a comment below. I'm really curious, and I'm sure other people would be too. There we go. I've already been talking for 20 minutes now. I apologize. Pretty typical for me, right? So I hope that helped. Thank you very much. Good luck in training. And if you have questions, comments, whatever, feel free, drop a comment below, or you can always reach out to me by email. or on that Facebook page called A Bear in the Air. Look at the top right-hand corner of my About page. There'll be a little link to a Facebook page. All right. Well, you guys have a good night, and I will talk to you soon. Fly safe.